Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast. My name is James Dixon, wishing you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever and wherever you join today's podcast from. And apologies, first of all, for a bit of a croaky voice today. I'm delighted to say that I was back at my first in-person event down at Excel in London over the weekend and returned late last night. And it was an enjoyable experience. It was a great experience to be back at an in-person event for the first time in 18 months. But I'm feeling it a little bit in the voice today, so apologies if it's sounding a bit like Barry White on today's podcast. And on with the show today, I'm delighted to say that joining us today to discuss a fantastic document that I've been reading prior to today's recording called "Organising Hybrid Events: Discover How to Run the Most Engaging Hybrid Events." It's been produced by Conference Compass, a company who I'm sure many of our podcast followers will be familiar with. And joining the podcast today is their CEO, Jelmer van Ast, to talk about this document. Jelmer, very warm welcome to the podcast and welcome back to the podcast. Nice to see you again.
Thanks, James. Great to be here again.
And as I said, this is a great document. You know, I've seen it briefly, but as with all good documents, you only have to look at them for a very brief period of time to know straight away that there's good content in there, that there's interesting stuff in there, that thought has been put into, you know, what content has gone into there. Tell me a little bit about it. Tell me a little bit about the roadmap, about how it came to be and how long it took to produce and what you hope to achieve with it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it's a document we've been producing that combines the experience we've been gaining over the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months, ever since our platform really matured to do full virtual events, and as this year went by, including hybrid events, and it combines the experiences we've got with some let's say future or forward thinking sort of vision statements of our own, of things that we believe will come up, even though we haven't seen them in real life. So it tries to combine actual experience with sort of our vision moving forward in this space.
Mm. And it's interesting, you know, within the first page of the document, there are some very well worded takeaways that you can get from it. Hybrid events combine the superpowers of
Mm-hmm.
online and in-person events to create better experiences. That's certainly something that most people would agree with. But on that first page, what jumped out to me were 5 trends pointing to a hybrid future. The first one being smaller and more local events, which I've mentioned a few times on the podcast in the last few months, that hybrid really gives us a good opportunity as an industry to offer smaller and more local events. Tell us why that was at the top of the list when you were putting those trends into the document.
Right. So we see these trends with our own customers organizing events and looking, towards the future of how to design their event calendar even. And that together with trends others have been researching and publishing about, this was one that it stood out. It's not, this order in our document is not necessarily reflecting the order of, I don't know, importance. I think
Mm-hmm.
there are other trends as well, for more inclusivity, more environmental awareness, that I
Yeah.
feel are equally important. But the smaller and more local events, I think it comes down to organizers, planners now being able to, let's say, think beyond the confinements of organizing events in the past. If you organize an event for your community, you'd want that, in the past at least, you'd want that community to be able to travel to a location, and you better organize a decent program of a couple of days in a large enough venue to accommodate that and make everybody's time worthwhile.
Mm.
And without that confinement of needing the people to travel and be in one place at the same time, you can start thinking about other ways of organizing, for instance, smaller events, smaller as in fewer attendees in person, but still reaching a larger audience by, either a multi-hub approach or a single hub, but including attendees joining online,
Mm-hmm.
and then still make it, a cost-effective way to host that event in that sense. So I think that's an incredible example of sort of our boundaries, our confinements being broken because of the pandemic. And I'd like to think from a positive state of mind, thinking that this provides opportunities to design better experiences.
Mm. Do you think that in addition to smaller and more local events, we could also add the word frequent in there as well? Being able to offer more
Yeah,
frequent events rather than this confinement that you were talking about when it comes to a venue, having to, we don't necessarily have to wait an entire year for the event to come round again.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think well, first of all, we've seen that with some of our customers. They organize a series of, let's say, times, all joined together, being one event. What would normally prior to COVID be one single event now be like a 4-hour program once a month, all across 8 months of the year.
Mm.
And that really goes hand in hand with, I think, something everybody instinctively at least knows is, for instance, learning is much more effective if it's done repetitively
Mm.
instead of entering into let's say in the classroom once, and you'll tend to forget things pretty rapidly after. And I think
Of
that's been the
course, yeah.
experience of conferences with a lot of content as well. Being able to do this more regularly will, I think, amplify the impact of learning, of education.
Yeah.
But also on the relationship way, we also all know that you build a relationship by uh, connecting with someone over time, not just once and then next year, hey, nice to see you again, and just pick up where we, yeah, if that's even possible, where we left off, say, 12 months ago. No, that
Mm.
also building a relationship requires multiple touch points across the year. So that's, I think, something events in this new day and age can really accommodate.
Do you know what? It's a really good point that you raised there in terms of education, in that you're right. To learn anything, you have to repeat it. Repetition is the key to learning how to do something well and improve your understanding of something. And do you know what? I don't think it's a point that's been raised before on the podcast about, the opportunity for more frequent events potentially, could present a better opportunity for learning. If we're talking
Absolutely.
about
And yeah.
events as CPDs or
Mhm.
experts being able to offer guidance and insight,
Yeah.
repetition is improved learning.
Absolutely. And it's not just repetition, it's also engagement. That's the other main factor in learning more effectively. It's to not just watch and just make your notes and let it digest, no, to actively participate. And
Mm,
online events for sure, and hybrid events as well moving forward are much better equipped to allow people to ask their questions without feeling embarrassed to do so, and for to upvote questions and participate in voting and Q&A and smaller workshops, all
mm,
to make the content more engaging. That's the second learning way to make learning more effective.
mm,
And then there are more ways. I mean, another way is to organize your content not just around one single, let's say, 30-minute or 90-minute session with a couple of 20 to 30 minutes presentations, but to, for instance, host the the the, the digestive part, if you like. We watch this content and then not necessarily are able to immediately respond to that, but then organize a week later another follow-up event with the same speakers to do the Q&A,
mm,
to give people the time to digest, come up with good questions, and then have an in-depth conversation later. So I think these three elements, more repetitive, more engaging, and adhering to a format that allows for better, let's say, digesting of the content, are
mhm,
three ways in which virtual events, hybrid events moving forward will make learning much more effective. And the kind of events that we support are mostly conferences, are mostly knowledge intensive events where learning is key. I'm very excited about the future of that being so much more effective than it ever was.
mm. I'm very keen to talk about some of the I suppose developments, adaptations that you've made to Conference Compass as a platform in the last 6 to 12 months. Because again, looking through this document that you produced, it strikes me straight away that there's a lot of features available within the platform that in other instances would require organizers maybe to have these tech stacks where they need 3 or 4 different providers to provide Q&A or speaker management or streaming solutions. Have you consciously tried to integrate as many features as possible into Conference Compass so that organizers don't have the complication of having to integrate multiple different providers?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a couple of drivers to how we decided to develop the platform in the way we did. Um, we first of all, we always came from being a mobile event app provider. That's been our legacy for the first 8 to 9 years of our existence, and very specified in the domain of conferences, where again knowledge and content is so much on the forefront. And when we decided to include the live streaming as a fundamental part of our offering, clearly driven by the pandemic and what that did to our industry, our customers, and ourselves, we decided that we needed to do at least three things really well. First of all, we needed to make it easy for our customers, and that in our understanding of easy, it means that you be able to set up your rooms, your virtual rooms, your in an easy way straight out of the gates from our platform. So no need to set up your sessions in Zoom or another platform and copy pasting links. We wanted to do that out of the box from our platform. That's one. The second one is that we wanted it to be our own developed user experience. So we
Yeah,
also decided to do live streaming using an existing platform, yes, but only using the what's called the software development kit, the SDK of that. So we built the whole UI and the entire user experience around that. So that means that we could really address the use cases our customers doing conferences, address those in a great UI, and not require our customers to deal with let's say, the limitations of a more general streaming platform that is for corporate meetings,
sure. Yeah,
for any types of work related meetings that are not in many cases not at all touching on the same requirements as conferences. And the third one is that we needed it to be, let's say, future proof. So we wanted it to be one single platform combining online and the mobile app. We've always, as I said, came from our legacy is mobile event apps. And we felt, okay, we not only need a solution for, let's say, the pandemic, we need a solution that's future proof. So not only our investment making into this, but also our customers who choose to work with us on this shouldn't be seeing this as an expense. Let's say we do this now and then that's money, spent, let's move on. No, see that as an investment as well that they can build on for their other events, whatever format they will take, the hybrid or blended, whatever you want to call it, format moving forward.
sure. Yeah, and something that again jumped out to me, looking through the document, is from a technical setup point of view. You've clearly addressed the needs of organisers and what AV technicians and production managers will potentially need or want to make their lives a little bit easier when they're now delivering hybrid events. A lot of platforms that we've spoken to and that we've all seen and heard and used in the last 12 months are very much geared towards virtual events, and a lot of them do the job very, very well. It's interesting to see that you very, very specifically looked at the technical requirements of a hybrid event, i.e., where you may have a speaker in person in a room in front of a live audience who is also being translated through a video link to a virtual audience as well. And there are options for speaker views for AV technicians to control some of that. Just tell us in a bit more detail about some of the thinking behind those particular features and what you've managed to incorporate into the platform.
Yeah, thanks. So clearly this was driven from the kind of questions we've been getting from our customers and partners. They are smart people, they know what they're talking about, so they go straight into the hard questions of, okay, great, but how will we do this in a hybrid setup? How would we connect this to the AV? And so early on, that forced us to think about it very well and to come up with answers and test these answers in our conversation. So that's how it was, how we decided to spend our time and energy on figuring this out. But to get to your point, to live stream some content from the room to an online audience, let's say that's the easy part. But to make it engaging for all attendees involved, that means that there should be an easy and unified way for attendees in the room, attendees in the online room, to be able to participate. And then you arrive on questions like, okay, so if a speaker has a question that, let's say, a voting, a polling question, so and that speaker is in the room, how can people participate? Well, then you can think of easy way to make the on-site participants participate, but then how to include the online participants, and the other way around as well. Like if the second speaker actually joins remotely and that person brings up a question, we can all envision how the remote people would vote, because it's like a virtual event. But how about the people in the room? So we thought really well of how first of all, the speaker, whether they present online or in person, what kind of controls they need to create those polls, and they will be created from our platform to make it a great unified experience. The second thing is we thought about how can we make the audience participate. Well, we have the mobile app for the people in the room, and whenever the speaker starts a question, it immediately pops up as a in the screen, so there's no searching, and the people in the room can simply vote their option in the same way as the online people would do. And the third one is how to then display and show these results on stage. And then we devised a different dedicated, let's say, display that's beamed, if you like, to the big screen in the room, compared to what the audience members online see in their, let's say, virtual room, and optimize the space. So we really thought about those, three main touch points of the user story of engagement at a hybrid event.
Yeah.
The speaker, the attendees, and the display online, and then figure that out. And actually, the page that we included in the brochure, the document that you have in front of you, is only one of a series of screens, because we also discovered, okay, there's no one way to do this. It actually depends on how much flexibility or how much control you want to give the speaker in the room, versus how, let's say, complicated you want it to make. So you could do it very simple, taking those controls away from the speaker and into the hands of a trained moderator or a trained technician in the back of the room who controls this. But that would require a speaker to say, well, next question, please. Or you'd have, perhaps for smaller rooms, or for rooms for sessions where you have the time and you'd want the speakers to do this themselves. You want to give those controls to the speakers. You can do with fewer people in the room, but it requires something extra for the speaker. So we've devised a number of those use cases of how to make this actually work. And I gotta say, we learn on as we go. We've had a series of hybrid events at this point, and one thing that is really striking out is that the communication, the interaction between our team and the AV people on site is crucial to really make this work, and to learn from how to do this even better. So it's also reinforced our relationships with the AV partners in the field.
Are you hoping as well that it's going to perhaps simplify the lives of technicians, of on-site speakers, because hopefully there are going to be fewer things to physically plug in and fewer inputs to have to switch on and off screens and things like that, because we're still very much in a learning phase, aren't we? We've had 12 months to adjust to using these platforms, but now that in-person events are back, we're now in a learning phase of how to deliver these hybrid events. So I suppose ultimately we need to make it as simple as possible at the moment, whilst we all learn about how to deliver these effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I really see this as the starting point, let's say the first page of a new chapter of our entire industry that's called the future of events, right? And it's you can call it hybrid, you can call it blended, but what it is I think what you started with, how to combine those superpowers of in-person events, and we all know those superpowers like really well: personal connections, emotion, the experience, the networking, and the human factor, and the superpowers of online events, lowering the barriers for engagement, content, on-demand access, better learning abilities, more tools available to have the audience participate. How to combine those two superpowers to create, as I say, this new chapter in of our industry.
Mm.
So that chapter is right now very very much unwritten,
Hmm.
and we're all writing the pages of that book. And the one thing everybody needs to do, and we, including ourselves, it's really part of our DNA, is to listen well, ask the right questions, speak out when you don't get it, and try to really get it, and learn as you go. So that's
Mm.
super important. We all need to be in this industry right now at our sort of in our learning on steroids mode. We
Yeah,
really need to go. We've maybe aged a bit, but we need to go back to the way we used to be learning, and when we were in primary school and high school.
absolutely. And I suppose when it comes to that learning element, and it's very apt that you say that, because I was just then looking at the round table element of things, and again, I I've seen firsthand how important the round table element of online events has become, because we were desperate last year to try and replicate that networking that we get when we go to an in-person event. Dare I say, it's relatively easy to stream somebody who is delivering a PowerPoint or a Google Slides session, down a video link. One person with a presentation is relatively simple, but to replicate 10 or 12 people sat around a table having that discussion, that peer-to-peer networking that we all like when we go to events. The round table element of virtual platforms and digital platforms is really, really important. And I wonder if we could just dive into that in detail for a couple of minutes and talk about some of the features and what you look to address with the round table element of the platform.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it may not be that, um, let's say, round tables are the best suitable for hybrid events. That may very well be.
Sure.
It may also very well be that it's a very much a matter of preference of
Hmm.
how one event organizer and one group of attendees and speakers just tries to do that one, either only with online participants or only with in-person participants.
Hmm.
Um, and but what we are doing is, well, offer that first of all, but also offer ways to still try and have the best possible experience if you try to blend those two audiences together. And one thing that really stands out is that you then need um, in person, either in person attendees to join easily from a quiet place using their computer or their smartphones or tablets. So that's where a mobile app also really comes in to join
Hmm.
the conversation with the others, or around an actual physical table with a screen and a camera connected to our platform, and basically see the audience, the in-person audience, as one of the video feeds, one of the video tiles in our screen. Audio is going to be a challenge then.
Yes.
Ideally, you do that in a quiet room, or you'd have people wear headphones. So that will impose requirements on the setup and on site, in the availability of rooms or the availability of headphone equipment, and
Hmm.
that all factors into how event organizers will go and make their choices of when to use what kind of use case and what kind of setup.
Hmm. But because one question that springs to mind is the one of connectivity, which has been an ongoing discussion in the industry for years now. When we talk about more digital platforms being deployed at in-person events, the connectivity has had to become a lot better, and obviously venues have worked to improve their infrastructure, and providers have also come up with innovative ways to supply mobile connections as redundancies if the in-house connections are not great. But I suppose when we start looking now down this learning curve of hybrid events and utilizing platforms to stream content out at the same time as your live in-person content in the room, the subject of connectivity clearly, is going to come to the fore again. Um, have you been able to sort of, you know, tweak or amend the platform in such a way that it helps reduce the amount of connectivity physically required?
Got you. Yeah. A very good point. Well, first of all, we've designed a platform and are improving it as we go to require the least amount of bandwidth as possible. So we try to be smart in the way we implement things in our algorithms. We implement in how the bandwidth is utilized, and that's going to be very important for those joining online on site, but also online. We've seen that the whole inclusivity part that I really advocate of being able to include a more, let's say, democratically people all across the world, regardless of their, their budgets, their age or health and safety requirements in an event. That also means that we have to lower the requirements for joining the platform. That means it needs to work really well, even in, let's say, poorer internet bandwidth conditions on all their computers and so on. So that's one thing we are really addressing. And secondly, maybe you.
No, I was just going to say that's an interesting point, because that goes back to one of the trends at the very start of this document, which stronger calls for inclusivity. If we're going to offer hybrid events, we're able to offer them to people who may not be able to travel, who may not have great internet connections, international visitors who can now essentially dial into these events that in the past they may not have been able to consider, whether it be financially or geographically. So if we're going to address the issue of inclusivity, we also have to address the issue of connectivity.
Absolutely. They are very well connected to each other, very much connected. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I interjected just to make that point as you were talking
you
about
asked, like, what are we doing to facilitate that, especially like considering the decades long struggle for venues to provide good connectivity to the people on site. Well, that's one thing we're doing. There's also there's a limit to what we can do here, because when it comes down to connectivity in the venue, that's not something we control. Again, I'm positive minded, and I do see a couple of trends that I think will make things easier. Like,
Sure.
First of all, now I think in the past, I think there are like maybe 5 reasons. Let me go through them quickly. First reason of me being optimistic is that in the past, I think connectivity, Wi-Fi was considered a nice to have in the venues. Yeah, sure, we need to accommodate people to be able to check their emails and to do those things. I mean, that's something we got to offer, right? And now it becomes a must-have. So I think that adds to the kind of attention that is being put into that. Secondly, I think 4G, 5G, but mostly 4G is so prevalent and is so in many cases in the EU, for instance, including, I believe, even Great Britain and other countries, on the European continent and your islands, they're all part of an agreement to make mobile data use in other countries in Europe according to the same plan as in your homeland. So that means basically for many people, that they have almost unlimited internet, let's say, bandwidth when traveling in Europe. And that, together with the more local, smaller events, would, I think, make it more likely that a large portion of the people participating on site will not need and not even be looking for the Wi-Fi, but they're just going to use their 4G. And I would recommend that as well from a safety perspective, like internet safety, I mean. So you want to, it's just way more safer, you'll manage your privacy much better if you use your 4G instead of joining the venue's Wi-Fi. So that's another trend, and there are a few more if you want to go into that.
No, just on that point, it is, again, it's a great one to raise, because in the early days of mobile internet, with the first, smartphones, with the first, iPhones when they came out, we were still in that situation where if we went abroad, if we went to an international event, or if we went on holiday for a week or 2 weeks, you'd have to buy these sort of specific plans that would cost you a lot of money and give you hardly any data because you couldn't use it abroad. then we reached this nice period, certainly, within the EU, where we were able to utilize our data plans in any part of the EU. And then, of course, Brexit happened, and that threw up more questions about whether or not that would be the case going forward. And I, I suppose not even outside of Europe, internationally now, we're so used to just being able to access the internet at the click of a button, or the flick of a swipe up the screen on our mobile devices, that it is becoming more and more critical that we retain that, for especially in the events industry, where we want to promote international visitors. We want people to start coming back to our international events. We've got to make it easy for them to be able to stay connected and do the things that they do on a daily basis.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like I said earlier, I think it's very well much driven from a trend that's like outside of the events industry already happening for so long. People expect to be connected also with voice and video to their families when traveling. And that's, the event industry is not special in that way. You need that just as much as you need it for other reasons. And I don't think we need to be, or even want to be, dependent on what the venue offers. I think that's really important for the AV companies being on site and having powerful networks to stream the content, not wirelessly, but through Ethernet cables. Just have the bandwidth available for that, and regard the attendees. Try to make a judgment call of how many of your attendees will not be able to use their 4G, and accommodate Wi-Fi for them, but the others will simply roam as they would on other places of their travel.
We're moving on through time on today's podcast, Jelmer, but you mentioned that there are a couple of other points that as well as connectivity that we were just discussing. Perhaps briefly before we wrap up today, let's get to some of those other points that you were referencing.
The trends, you mean?
Yes, the trends.
Yeah. So we talked about smaller, more local events. We briefly talked about inclusivity, and I mean, inclusivity is a loaded term, and I'm not considering inclusivity in any political way, just as a way to give an equal level playing field for people all across the world to be able to join those events, mostly those events that we support, the conferences, which are about learning, which are about connecting to other people, connecting to the industry. And the more accessible we can make that, the better the entire world will be off. So that includes giving people a choice. I think it's fundamentally about giving people the opportunity and a choice, whether they want to join online or in person. And that freedom, I think, is going to be key moving forward. And I don't want to travel anymore as much as I did prior to the pandemic. And it's not because of a health and safety concern from my perspective. For others, it will be. It's perhaps not even a budget reason, although partly it is. But it's also very much a reason of how I want to spend my time. I have a family. I think you see in the background some signs of me having young kids. I don't want to be away from home as much as I was before. So that's my reason, and others will have their own reasons to make decisions between how they want to join events moving forward. So that's a very important one. Another trend is about obviously increasing awareness for the environmental impact of our traveling.
Of course.
It's been a topic forever. For the last so many years, there've been talks about this at conferences and also at events for the industry, right? So the event industry, obviously we are gathering as well to exchange our thoughts and learn about best practices and new insights. And this has been a topic forever. I think people have been very conflicted about, how can we advocate environmental impact when lowering environmental impact when all we do is organizing events requiring people to travel and put more CO2 in the atmosphere.
Well, on that subject, it became obvious if we all think back to spring last year, when the pandemic hit and pretty much every country in the world went into a really tight lockdown. There were no cars on the road. There were no buses. There were very few trains. There was no air travel. There were no planes in the air. And within a few weeks of the lockdown being implemented internationally, you were reading about lower CO2 levels, clearer skies. The air was just felt cleaner. I know people who live in London who said it was noticeably different. That they could look up and just the sky at night was just clearer because of the reduction in air travel. So within a matter of weeks, by reducing our emissions and reducing the amount of vehicles that we were using to get from A to B, there was a clear impact on that. So I think if people didn't need, if anybody needed convincing more so than the evidence that's already out there, just that initial part of the lockdown last year where we stopped traveling and the clear and obvious benefits that gave us, I think is as big a incentive as you ever need to look at reducing travel and offering opportunities to people who may choose not to travel from a sustainability point of view.
Absolutely. So this is not something sustainable, right? This was only the fact that no one traveled was obviously just for a few weeks, and then I think that part of that got back to normal pretty quickly. I was in traffic jams as much as I was before COVID, a couple of months into the pandemic. But well, first of all, I think it opened people's eyes.
Yeah.
And secondly, well, I think we're going to see a lot of positive impact from the electric vehicles moving forward. But for international travel, planes, they will take much longer, I think, for them to go electric or in another way that reduces their impact on the CO2. So for international travel, especially, I think that would be top of mind for people who are like, well, I'm driving an electric vehicle now. I have solar panels on my rooftop. I'm mindful of the meat that I eat and how I live my life, and then I'm still traveling by airplane 5 times a year to those destinations. Really, so I think that will help to make people say, okay, I'm going to just pick 2 or 1. Okay, for those, I really want to be there in person, and that's international travel. I will join a few others by train that are more local, and then the others I will join online. First of all, more opportunities for learning and content, because I think people will attend more events this way. But also, secondly, more choice for people to live their life in the way they want to be, with the things they value, including environmental impact.
Absolutely. We're coming close to time, Jelmer. So if you don't mind, I'd like to skip on to a question that I think is really important to ask before we wrap today. And it's one of sponsorship opportunities, financial opportunities for organizers with hybrid events. Whether or not you think that, are we still very much at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to exploring the opportunities that hybrid events now present from a revenue and a sponsorship opportunity for organizers?
Yeah, very much so, at the tip of the iceberg. At the same time, we've also learned so much over the last year or more. We've learned also, we ourselves as exhibitors at trade shows we attend, but also the exhibitors, sponsors at the conferences we support. We've seen a bunch of things that work and a bunch of things that don't work. I think, like, broadly speaking, what doesn't work online, and neither I think it's ever worked in person, is to be passive, to be just standing in front of your booth and have people walk by and speak to them, or hope that they'll speak to you, and then just fingers crossed, hopefully they're you're within your target market of all the people that are there. And chances are they're not, and you're speaking and wasting your time on the wrong people. That's been always a factor. And now it's been amplified. Like many things the pandemic has done, is amplified things that were already brewing, boiling there, things that were not right, or trends that have been started. Everything's been amplified by the pandemic, and this is one. You can't be passive. You never, it was a great strategy to be passive and hope
No.
for, wish for great meetings at your in-person event. At an online event, forget about it. You're not going to have people walk by your booth and speak to you. You need, first of all, there are a couple of things you can do. Content works really well online in an online event. So the most successful exhibitors that we've seen and the most success we've had being exhibitors is when we had something to say, and there was a time allocated for us to speak on a subject we were knowledgeable about and that others, especially those in our target market, wanted to hear from. So we were meeting not with 200 people, but then with maybe 10 or 12 people, but they were the right kind of people, and they were interested in what we had to say, and they were buying in our credibility. So that's very important. Another thing that's very important is the data we're gathering. It is so hard to gather data at in-person events, and data is obviously much more easy to gather in an online space. So figure out what the data is that you need to get, so they test, either approve or disprove the objectives you've set for your own trade show participant, and look honestly at the data and try to take lessons. What worked, what didn't work. So that's data, super important. And data goes across all aspects, simply banners, sort of visibility kind of data, but also very much engagement and interaction. And then we get to the last point, and that's let's say the coincidence of meeting the right people. We want to reduce that coincidence as much as possible. We want to make everybody's time to be well spent, not just for the exhibitors talking to the right people, but also the other way around. So wasted time, I think, is something that really should be something of the past very soon, and technology can be a key to that based on your preferences, your profile, AI. You can have the right matches between people who will have basically, it doesn't matter if it's about a research topic or it's about talking about learning about a product. It's worth your while. That's the kind of measure we all want to be optimizing.
Absolutely. We've been talking on the podcast today to Conference Compass CEO Jelmer van Ast, who's joined us today to talk about this fascinating document that Conference Compass produced called Organizing Hybrid Events, discover how to run the most engaging hybrid events. And genuinely, I would urge anybody tuning into the podcast today to get in touch with the guys at Conference Compass and get a copy of this document, have a read through it. There's loads of stuff that you'll be able to pick out. And, even if you're not a user of their platform, there's fantastic information in there. You can have a look through it, and there'll be loads of stuff that will get you thinking and asking your own questions about how you're delivering hybrid events. And we should say, Jelmer, before we wrap today, that if anybody does want to get in touch with you, how do they find you? How do they get in touch? Where do they go?
Right. So go to our website, conferencecompass.com. Go to our LinkedIn or Twitter or any of those handles. But also feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to speak with you or refer you to a colleague, and you'll find me on LinkedIn just by searching for my name. I think that's the easiest way.
Yeah, and I did that exactly myself this morning. I just checked the Conference Compass LinkedIn page. So if you just go onto LinkedIn and search for Conference Compass, you'll find the guys' page, and you'll be able to connect with their communities on there. And genuinely, I maybe I don't say this enough with our guests, but in this instance, go and check out this document. Ask for it to be sent through to you as a PDF, or have a read through what they're doing, because there's loads of interesting stuff there, and it's really easy to digest and pick things out of that document. So Jelmer, I should say thank you, not just for joining us today, but for putting this document together, for sending it through for me to look at, and for making it available to our podcast listeners. It's been great to see you again, and great to have a chat with you on the podcast again.
Likewise. Thanks, James. It was a pleasure.
Not a problem at all. And of course, if any of our podcast viewers and followers wish to get in touch with us, if you're listening to today's podcast, head over to eventindustrynews.com and you can check out video versions of all the podcasts, as well as all the latest news, features and supplements. That is on eventindustrynews.com. Of course, if you're already on the website today and you're watching this, well, hello to you as always. Don't forget that you can go to your podcast platform on your mobile device, whichever one you use, and listen to audio versions of all of our 250 something podcasts. And it brings us to the end of another episode. It's been great to be joined by Jelmer van Ast from Conference Compass today. My name's James Dixon, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Event Industry News podcast. Goodbye, everybody.